Somewhere along the way, us men were handed a lie. And most of us, we believed it. The lie that being a man means being hard. No tears, no apologies, no weakness. We got to bury it all down, push through it, and don't let them see it. And so we built our armor, layer by layer, year by year, and we got really good at wearing this armor. But here's what nobody tells us. The armor that was supposed to protect us is the same armor that's keeping our daughters from getting close. The strongest thing you'll ever do as a father is take it off. Today, we're going to talk about the new definition of what it means to be strong. Welcome to the First Hero Podcast. I'm your host, Corey.
And I'm Rich.
And today, we're going to talk about a very controversial subject, something that a lot of us men don't like to talk about. And the point of this is to hopefully rewire some of your beliefs of what it means to be strong in today's society. We're going to talk about the V word. And no, Rich, it's not what you mean.
The V word.
It's the V word. It's vulnerability. Get your mind out of the gutter.
Yeah, vulnerability. This one mixed with masculinity. This is going to be a good episode because there's a lot of hot buttons here.
Yeah, a lot of hot buttons, and there's definitely a lot of energy that's going to be around it. A lot of pinching, a lot of calling out the mainstream masculinity. And what we're going to do is we're really going to call out what masculinity means, and we're going to try and define it in the terms of the first hero aspect, right? And if you align with it, great. If not, also great. So we're gonna launch this episode with the lie that we were handed about masculinity, right? There was a lie, or maybe just a truth that's no longer a truth. Maybe it was true at one point in society and culture because maybe we had to be, a certain way. But I think now that we're in this culture of safety, of more or less safety, and we're not being hunted by tigers, and we're no longer cowboys in the West trying to survive. I think we have to define the term of masculinity and what it means, right?
Yeah, and I think more importantly, for those of you man's men that are listening to this, hang with us here because we're not about to sprinkle glitter on anything or do anything like that. But I think as an evolved man in a society that has evolved, these are really, really important fundamentals to be adapted well for survival in today's arena.
That's right. Today's arena. I love that.
So, yeah, I mean, let's talk about where these lies come from.
Yeah. So I think, I know a lot of our beliefs have been externally imposed on us, right? Mm-hmm. Through culture, society, our parents' parents, right? What we kind of come together and we kind of agree on systemically as a culture, right? And I think, it's also driven by propagandized. A lot of, the way we see ourselves as men today is just one big propaganda war, which, we're not going to get too into, but it's cultural. It's if you don't know how to cook meat, then you're not a man.
Yeah.
Right.
You gotta hunt. You gotta kill.
You gotta hunt. You gotta kill. Like you gotta suck it up. You gotta bury all those emotions and don't cry. And you gotta be tough and tough as fucking nails. And most of us absorbed that in childhood. Mm-hmm. These were beliefs imposed on us from a very young age that we really and we adopted these beliefs and we didn't really know what they were. Right. We carry these beliefs into adulthood now, and that's just how we operate without kind of auditing those thoughts or beliefs. Right.
And it wasn't just men that were passing this down either. I think it was also, it could have been our mothers. Yeah. It could have been the females in our life at the time because they were also subjected to the narrative of what a man should be.
Yeah.
And their
big boys don't cry.
Their toughness and roughness and standoffish, and kind of that brute strength type of emotional shutdown. That emotional pullback, all of that.
100%. And this version of masculinity of what, you got to be tough as nails, emotionally mute, man up, big boys don't cry. That was modeled for us at a very young age again, right? So I was a firefighter for many years. I was also in the military. And those are environments where that was like the nut up or shut up. Like you have to be a man or not. And that was very much reinforced. And when I look back on it with this new lens, the word toxic masculinity. I know a lot of you men get triggered by it, but there is toxic masculinity, femininity. There's just being a toxic fucking person, right? Like, we don't need to label it or anything, but there are traits that I would label on the more aggressive, toxic / violent side, if we really want to like label it. And, those are the brute strength, the emotional shutdown without the warmth, right? And that's what we're going to kind of break down here in this episode.
Yeah.
Right. So, Rich, I'm curious, like when you were a kid, what was the laundry list? Because I'll share mine after yours. What was the laundry list of like the top 10 things that you need to have to be a man? Like, what did that mean to you when you were a kid?
I was thinking about this in preparation for this episode. I was very fortunate that my father went through a season when I was really young or he was still in a season when I was very young where he was still a version of this man up, don't cry type of version of himself. But I would say before I was of the age of 10, my dad did this profound pivot and found a connection to himself that I think most men never do.
Right.
And so I got to see both sides. But for me, like, I don't know to this day. Yeah, I've seen my dad cry. A lot of it can be unspoken, right? This is an example of one. For my dad, like, there's nothing that my dad was like preaching to me and like implanting ideas verbally in my head about this topic. But something that I noticed even at a young age is like, my dad doesn't cry. Never saw him cry. For the first time I saw him cry maybe in my 20s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just that alone was like, well, I mean, my dad doesn't cry, like,
right.
What must not be a thing.
Right. And it was also reinforced by like,
sure,
other people saying don't cry.
Sure.
Men don't cry.
And at that point, right? Like maybe I would definitely see my mom cry.
Yeah.
Right. I would definitely see other people cry, but my dad never did. Right. And so, I mean, now I understand that was probably a connection to his emotional state at the time, and maybe disconnecting from his emotions later in my life. I could tell he made this big pivot in connecting with his emotions. And personally, I felt his masculinity, went to the next level,
right?
Because he could be, and we're going to dive into this, but it's showing strength in a vulnerable state.
Yeah, for sure. I think now that I look at it, the laundry list of things, that requires a man to be a man is like starkly different than what it was growing up, right? And luckily, same for me. Like, my dad was a transitional character. He was a cycle breaker in his family. Like, everyone else is either dead or on drugs, or like my dad is the transitional character. He is the outlier from his family. And I was very lucky because my dad was very self-aware. He had a lot of reflective qualities that he passed down, and really a lot of that toxic masculinity, or and I'm using the word toxic masculinity very loosely because I know that's widely used, but the traits that cause people to call it toxic masculinity, he didn't really have a lot of those. I learned a lot of that on the playground, growing up, and especially once you get into the fire industry or the fire or the military. That's when it's like, dude, it is just such a parasite, I believe, and it's just like really gets in the way of our growth. But the laundry list when I was a kid was, you got to be able to cook meat. If you can't cook meat, you're not a man. If you fall and scrape your knees, then you're not. You got to suck it up. You got to be emotionally mute, and emotionally mute to the sense where, where you're using stoicism as not a tactful way of being stoic in the eye of a storm, but you're emotionally mute. You just don't do anything, like nothing, like you don't open up. That's what it is to be a man. And now when I look at the paradigm, or I look at what it means to be a man with this lens of today, modern, as now I'm a grown man, I'm in my late 30s, it's grit, perseverance, it's compassion, right? Compassion's a big one. Vulnerability is a huge one. Self-awareness, reflective, being able to reflect, gentle, kind, right? But also being a force to be able to protect your family and protect your own, right? And none of those does it say you need to be hard and tough as nails. Yes, sure, you should, but what it means to be a man is you can be those things and also be warm and gentle, right?
Something that comes to mind, dude, is I think Bedros talks about this.
Yeah.
masculinity, the way that I see it today, is someone who can do all of those things, possess all of those traits as a man. And I think it's so critical for us as girl dads to really exemplify the blend of this, which is someone who is compassionate, warm, heart-centered, good communication, aware, emotionally intelligent and adapted, resilient, and possesses an extreme ability for violence if needed.
Right. That's being peaceful.
That's a dangerous man.
Right.
That is a dangerous man, and that's a man that can stand by your daughter.
Yeah.
And let's face it, if you envisioned your daughter with someone in the future, with a man by her side, all of those, that's what you would want. You would want a man who was so well adapted to be able to cherish her and be with her mentally, physically, and emotionally, but also to be able to flip a switch and step into full-blown like
Violence.
caveman violence if needed.
Straight
right?
up.
To protect her, protect the family. And that's really what we're talking about. And I think what we're pushing against is this concept that a lot of us were fed where it's not a blend of the two. It's more so of like, it's either or. Either you're soft and, you talk about your emotions and you can't swing a bat or throw a punch, or all you can do is throw a punch and kick people in the face and knock teeth out, but you have no connection outside of that. And I think that that's what we're trying to draw a stark line between.
Blend the two and meet the other one. It's either you're one or the other. There's a stark contrast. Either you're a master in being a feminine father or girl dad, or you're some badass tactician who can knock people out, right? You can be both.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but there's a true detriment to that, right? There's a cost to being that way, right? To being the quintessential father that's hard as nails, tough as nails, emotionally mute, right? And as a girl dad, this is very important to understand the stark contrast because, dude, I promise you, I'm telling you, if you keep living your life like this, if you're like, hey, this is me, if you keep living your life like this, using these common lies, the lies of masculinity in today's society, hard as nails, tough, right? Gonna rub some fucking dirt on it. She's gonna hate you, bro. Mm-hmm. She is going to hate you, and she's gonna love you because you're her father. But she's not gonna want anything to do with you. She's not gonna want to connect. She's not gonna be connected. She's not gonna see you as safe. She's not gonna feel secure in the relationship, and she's gonna run. Like she's literally gonna avoid you. She'll talk to you because she has to, but she's never gonna come to you and say, "Hey, Dad, this is what's bothering me," because it's usually met with opposition. It's usually met with control, right? Manipulation, if you want to call it. Hey, you need to do this, you need to do that because you're so rough and rugged and you have these beliefs that it's totally going to it's going to ruin your relationship with your daughter, right? There are key skills that we need to sharpen here, right? There's cognitive abilities, these skills that we need to work on, right? It's self-awareness, it's reflective communication, listening, shutting the hell up and listen to your goddamn daughter, right? And first and foremost, vulnerability, to be able to be vulnerable. Right? So if any of this stuff is hitting for you, if it's landing for you, you're one of us, right? You're a cycle breaker. You're waking up, right? So, but we have something for you. We have a quiz. We have a girl dad quiz for you. And this is a compatibility test with you and your daughter, right? To show you your strengths, weaknesses, blind spots. And it's a 5-minute quiz. It'll tell you exactly what you are. Go in somewhere in the description around this video. There's a link to this quiz. Take it. It's probably the most important thing you're going to do all day, all year, in the rest of your life. I promise you. You're going to get a bunch of cool stuff, a bunch of cool free stuff with it, right? So let's move on because I want to talk about something else that's very important. And we're going to lead into the last thing I just talked about, which is vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah, let's define what strong vulnerability looks like. It's I think a lot of us men, we think about vulnerability as when you're just falling apart, dude. Yeah. You're falling apart at the seams, you're just you have no rigidness left. You're just a puddle.
And
right?
You're just open.
You're just open.
All your secrets. Here's all your secrets.
Like,
right?
And I think this is what's really important because vulnerability has two types.
Yeah.
And so the way we see it, right? We've talked about this. There's toxic vulnerability and then there's tactical vulnerability.
Yep.
And so first, let's talk about tactical vulnerability, because this is really what we want to harness as men and as girl dads. We want to be sure that we are being very tactical in our approach to vulnerability and not just assuming and lumping all vulnerability into, oh, it's toxic. It makes us weak, soft. It loses respect. It loses, it loses our position. We'll dive into what that looks like as well. But first, let's talk about tactical vulnerability. And really, this is I think the basis of it is reciprocity. Reciprocity meaning if you meet someone somewhere, they usually are willing to meet you as well and reciprocate. And so being vulnerable, if you haven't experienced this, I would encourage you to, but we've all been in these moments, whether you're a father listening and you're like, oh, I don't know, I've never been in that moment where I've been vulnerable. Well, maybe you need to peel back the curtain a little bit further and take a deeper look, my friend. But there are moments that each of us experience. It can be at extreme highs. It can be at devastating lows. Typically at the opposite ends of those spectrums is where if we don't have an awareness of vulnerability and we're not using it tactically, then it will show up, but it'll show up automatically by default when we're at the polar opposite ends of the spectrum of when we need to use it and when we're at our worst, at our rock bottom, or at the highest high. And we're having a conversation with somebody very vulnerably about where we're at, right? It's just like a euphoric feeling. But there's reciprocity. When you meet somebody at when you deliver yourself at a very vulnerable place, people tend to meet you there.
Yeah.
Right. And that is a very, very important quality to teach your daughter. And that's a very important space.
Yeah.
Like you introduced me to a term called brave space. Mm-hmm. And I believe that is the core of it, right? Yeah. It's a space of vulnerability. It's a space where you're encouraging the parties involved in that space to meet you and be brave. Yeah. Be brave enough to speak. Yeah. Speak vulnerably, shed the armor, talk through the bullshit, and connect at a level that is much deeper than surface, because that's where a lot of the work can be gained.
Yeah, I love it, and that was from Brené Brown actually in her book Daring Greatly.
Love it.
Or Daring to Lead, or one of the two. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Love it.
Yeah. So to kind of chime and like kind of echo what Rich is saying, I think most men get tied up with an improper definition of vulnerability, right? As a girl dad, I think it's very important to understand the two key differentials of vulnerability, because this is very important, because as a culture, we tend to say as men, vulnerability is weakness. And actually it's not. It's actually the strength that opens you up to connection. So the two types of vulnerability, I'll kind of talk on toxic, right? This is no term coined by anyone. I just added this in there. This is my definition of what vulnerability means, because there's a spectrum of vulnerability, and we need to understand the two of those before we can really make a decision on whether or not vulnerability is weak or not. Because if we use it in the way that Rich and I use it tactically, why wouldn't you use it as a skill, right? Why would you not, right? So toxic vulnerability, there's a threshold that you cross with toxic vulnerability, and that's typically with oversharing, or if you're emotionally spilling. When you start making someone feel uncomfortable, or when you start making someone feeling like your emotions are now their burden and responsibility, i.e. your daughter, I think that is toxic vulnerability. And I think that's what we label classic vulnerability or tactical vulnerability nowadays. So now what I want to do is I want to flip the switch and now kind of echo what Rich is saying. Tactical vulnerability is very intentional. Like we're using this as a tool. When I go into a dialogue with my daughter, my wife, or anyone, I'm using vulnerability tactically to open you up, create connection, to create trust inside of this dialogue, that security. I'm safe. It creates security in the conversation. You're safe. It happens psychologically, unconsciously. When someone opens up to you and is vulnerable, it in the listener or whoever you're talking to, unconsciously your mind is cueing this person safe and secure. I can open up to them, right? You're saying, hey, I've faced struggle too, and here's what I've learned from it, right? That's what tactical vulnerability is. It's sharing your struggles, your emotions, but also it's sharing your mistakes in a way that builds trust, connection, and influence, right? So what Rich talked about, reciprocity, I'm going to talk about it real quick, and then I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Rich. But I wanted to talk about tactical vulnerability and the law of reciprocity and creating this feedback loop, because what happens psychologically is very important with vulnerability. And this is where I once I learned the law of reciprocity and vulnerability, it just clicked for me. So hopefully I can create this epiphany inside of you, right? When you're using vulnerability tactfully, right? There's an outcome. You want something. You have a mission, and that mission is to create a feedback loop of reciprocity. So reciprocity by Robert Cialdini, he was the one who framed it, is humans feel an internal pressure to return what they receive, right? So if someone gives us something, we instinctively feel compelled to give something back. It's like Christmas. When someone gives you a Christmas present you didn't expect, you're like, fuck, dude, I didn't get you a Christmas present. Like that is reciprocity, right? And that's so powerful, right? It's so powerful. When someone shows authentic vulnerability, you're compelled. It kicks this reciprocity and you're compelled to then share yourself, right? As a girl dad, this is very important to understand with your daughter, because when I'm, I have a toddler, but when I'm talking to my wife or anyone in that matter, my main point when I know it's a heavy conversation or it's a conversation about emotions or if someone wants to listen, I'm throwing the first punch, and that's tactical vulnerability. I want to make sure that this brave space or the box or the container that we're in is safe and secure. And the other person on the other side knows, okay, Corey's safe, I can talk to him, right? It builds trust, empathy, and it triggers our mirror neurons.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it takes no courage to stay numb, and any man can shut down, but it really, truly takes a warrior to feel the full weight of something and still choose to show up anyway. And that's not weakness. That is truly strength, that a man can do anything with that.
Right.
That is the strongest version of us as a man.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's talk about, for most of us girl dads, let's talk about where one of these areas where vulnerability in real life situations as a girl dad shows up the most. And that's got to be in admitting when we're wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
It's probably the hardest vulnerability.
It's the hardest, and I think it starts at the youngest age.
Yeah.
Like, it starts when they're 1. Like, I was fortunate enough to grasp this concept, when this is a concept that I've been aware of and familiar with and had an awareness around throughout, from when I first became a father.
Yeah.
And so I've been apologizing to my little girls ever since they could understand, before they could speak words.
Yeah.
Because daddy does screw up, and I need them to know that I'm human, but part of being human is being willing to step up and admit that I'm wrong and showcase what a man does in the mirror, when the mirror is in front of them and they realize that they're wrong, right?
Yep.
So we'll dive into this and talk a little bit about this, but why do fathers avoid apologies?
Oh man. Well, I mean, this goes deep. If you want to listen to another one of our podcasts about repair after rupture, a lot of that stems from childhood because they've learned that mistakes are bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then your nervous system sends all these signals to say, well, you're bad. So what happens is fathers feel shame. They feel guilt. They feel, less than, and they need to hide that. And they need to bury that. So when they feel mistaken or feel wrong, they avoid repair altogether.
Yep.
Because they learn that failure and repair and making repair is dangerous. Right? It's a dangerous thing for your nervous system. So it's so uncomfortable and so unbearably uncomfortable to admit you're wrong or apologize that most men just don't even do it.
Yeah, it's like it's being embarrassed, being publicly embarrassed, right? You're losing authority, you're losing respect, you're losing control.
Right.
And all of those are signals to the brain from us being wired as young men that failure is bad.
Right. Authority is power. And if you don't have authority, that means I'm weak.
Exactly.
That's the story in your head.
And that is part of those are traits that are aligned with the toxic version of masculinity.
Yep.
When masculinity is fueled by or the lack thereof, or vulnerability is fueled by those traits, I think that's what we're really pushing back against, because it just, it doesn't have a place.
Yeah.
It's just, we're more adapted than that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we have an opportunity to be more adapted.
Right.
For sure.
Definitely a big opportunity. And really before we move on, there's three moments of vulnerability that really land the hardest, and especially as a girl dad with your daughter. These are very important to understand. The 3 key moments of vulnerability is after a mistake. So this is where repair happens. This is where you say, I didn't handle that well. I was wrong. Sorry. When naming emotions. This is very important to name emotions, right? If you name it, you can tame it. And then you're also building awareness with your daughter. But this teaches emotional literacy, right? I'm frustrated right now, so I'm going to take a deep breath before we talk. That's a moment of vulnerability, right? Because you're sharing your emotions with most men want to shut emotions down. No, we don't want to do that, right? And then the third time is when sharing growth. This is the kicker, dude. Right here. This teaches that adults evolve, that you evolve. You're constantly learning. Hey, my dad didn't teach me this, so now I'm going to be more, I'm going to learn how to do that with you, right? This is extremely powerful because it reframes the father as someone who's actively growing. That's the three key moments of vulnerability as a girl dad.
Yeah, I love it. And those are very real world examples.
Yeah.
You know, on a daily basis, if you have daughters, you can find places to implement this because none of us are perfect. That's not the goal here. The goal is to be growing and be in pursuit of a better version and of that idea of being a first hero in spite of our imperfections.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. You're modeling accountability.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's very important to understand, you know, feeling everything, all the emotions, feeling the weight, the uncomfortability of vulnerability, because it's going to be so uncomfortable until you make it a skill. And even still, like I have a vulnerability skill that's pretty high, and it's still very uncomfortable for me sometimes. But being able to feel everything and still do the hard thing is what a designer does, a hero does, right? A drifter, he notices or not even notices at all, and he just keeps, he avoids it. He doesn't, he pushes it down, and he doesn't feel like he wants to address these things, right? Strength is not the absence of it. Strength is not the absence of being fearful or grief or guilt. It's action in the presence of those feelings. That's what's important here, right? Courage is being scared, but saddling up anyways.
Yeah.
That's being a real cowboy, being a real man now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is, I think that was always the version of it, but it was clouded because there wasn't, if you look at where this came from, there probably wasn't as much of a need for the warm version of it back in back in like the Wild West days.
That's what I'm saying. Like
it just wasn't necessary. We weren't evolved enough to need the tactical version of vulnerability.
Yeah, because we had to be dangerous. We had to be hard and tough as nails to survive.
90% of the time.
To survive, I have to kill this dude because he's going to shoot me.
Right.
You know, and then that we just carried that on, and then that's what it perpetuated. And now we're in a society and a culture where we don't need to be hard as nails. We can choose to be. We don't have to be.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah. It can be a flip. It can be a switch.
Yeah. Well, I think let's land the plane, dude. Let's do this hot take.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do. So for those of you new who's listening, we're gonna land the plane. We've had a nice, impactful podcast episode, and now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna share a quote with Rich, and Rich that he's never seen or never heard, or he's heard, but it's unbeknownst to Rich. He doesn't know what I'm saying, and then he has to give a hot take of what it means to him. So this is what I got for you today, and I think it's fitting. Vulnerability is not about winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome.
One more time, read that.
Vulnerability is not about winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome.
Yeah. I think this is what's so terrifying for us men is there's a couple keywords in there that I think hit me if I put myself in the perspective of an older version of myself. But the first thing is, as a man, strength, respect, position, authority, status, a lot of those things can be words that describe us or internal beliefs or internal accolades. And vulnerability at its core to the point of this is the absence of that. You have to be able to leave all that shit to the side to be able to really meet someone vulnerably, because it's not about winning or losing. It's not about having an edge. It's not about moving forward your agenda. Yeah. It's about delivering yourself in a way where you can communicate where you're at and then completely separate the results from you delivering very honestly and authentically where you're at.
Love it.
And that is the difficulty, because you have to let go of the control. You have to let go of all of the limiting beliefs and all of the shit swirling around in our heads, and you have to deliver yourself unarmored and stand there with no armor, and you have to be okay with the outcome. And sometimes for us men, that can feel very, very close to death.
Out of control.
Out of control, dude.
Yep.
Exposed. And so that's why I think that this topic is truly at the core of being a very, very strong man and being in touch with your masculinity today. Because, dude, I mean, you can go to the gym and bench 315 pounds, but if you can't fucking stand there with all of your armor shedded in front of someone and be okay and be strong and bold enough to
Someone you love and care for?
Someone you love and care for, or even not. Even if you were to just expose yourself and you know, take off your armor and be okay with the results of whatever it is, and know that you're strong enough internally to manage whatever is about to come at you, dude, that's a whole different level of strength, man. That is a whole different level of strength.
That's it. So if this episode hits you, if you recognize the armor that you've now been wearing, if you recognize, you're like, dude, I have armor. Like, this podcast was made specifically for you, right? You're a cycle breaker. You're no longer drifting. You've understanding you're drifting, and now you're a designer of your life. You're the hero, right? You're a man choosing a different path. You were a girl dad choosing a different path, not only for you, but for your family and your daughter, right? So go take the girl dad quiz if you haven't yet. It's a compatibility test. It shows your strengths, weaknesses. I mean, it's not a very comprehensive test. It's 5 minutes, but it gives you a lot of insight on where you're at and where you can improve. It takes 5 minutes, and you get a whole bunch of cool free resources as well to become a better badass dad that you can be not only her first hero, but her best hero. So remember, distraction is the enemy. Breaking the cycle is your duty. And legacy is the only thing we leave behind. And you are just one decision away from becoming the first and best hero your daughter deserves.